You probably heard of firewalls before, but here's a quick rundown on what they do and how you can configure one to secure your system. I'm going to be using UFW, or the Uncomplicated Firewall, because, well, it's not very complicated. It's a network level firewall, so it's filtering packets based on rules for IP addresses, ports, and protocols primarily, and it's certainly much easier than configuring raw IP tables rules directly. UFW actually just functions as a front end for IP tables, or NF tables, which is the program that really does the firewall in the background, depending on your system. But the syntax for making rules with UFW is much more straightforward than the IP tables rules that you're looking at right now. In fact, if I were to run UFW status verbose to show you the rules that I have running on this Linux machine, it ends up being pretty self-explanatory. So first we have the status of the UFW program itself, which is active, meaning that it's running. The logging level is on low, which is the default setting that is only going to log packets that are blocked by your firewall's rules. So for example, if you were to block port 80 on your server and then someone attempts to connect to it, maybe they're trying to view a web page that you don't want them to view, that's going to log a failed attempt inside of var log ufw.log for you to view and then respond to as necessary. Next, we have our default rules, and this first one, the default deny incoming, has tripped up countless people who didn't know about it or just didn't really understand what it was doing. So deny incoming is an implicit deny rule that blocks all packets from all ports and all IP addresses coming into the server unless a rule is created to allow a specific type of traffic. And if this is a VPS or some kind of remote server in a data center somewhere, it's very easy to lock yourself out if you end up enabling UFW without first allowing in SSH traffic. In fact, whenever you enable UFW, or even if you try to reset it with a UFW reset, it gives you this warning that resetting all rules may disrupt an existing SSH connection, and then it asks you if you want to proceed. So this is going to disable UFW, and then if I decide to enable it again, it tells us again that this may disrupt existing SSH connections. Do we want to proceed with this operations? Now, you can proceed with yes, and if you accidentally do this, if you accidentally proceed without first allowing SSH through, there is still a chance to fix it. You can see that my firewall is still on with this implicit deny rule. So technically it would be blocking SSH connections, but it's not terminating this existing SSH connection. So any new connection would be blocked without kicking us out. But if you have an unstable network connection, or if your SSH connection times out for any type of reason, and you enabled UFW without creating this rule, then you're going to have a bad time. And some other common firewall mistakes include a denial of service to your own website by not allowing port 80, or by breaking the SSL connection to your website by not allowing port 443. But luckily, the UFW developers knew about these common errors, and so they created shortcuts to create rules for these common applications like UFW allow SSH. And now if I run a UFW status, and I'll go ahead and do the verbose so we can see the implicit deny and all that jazz, you see now that port 22 is allowed in from anywhere, both over IPv4 and IPv6. Now, there's usually a couple of application profiles that ship with UFW depending on what distro you use and depending on what's installed primarily. And you can see them by running UFW app list. And so we can see that we have one for cups, we have a few different ones for Nginx, and we also have the Open SSH profile as well. And this Nginx one, this gets installed when you install Nginx, and same thing would get installed for different web servers, at least if you're using one of the more popular ones. For example, if I sudo, or I can just apt install Apache 2, and then this is going to install everything, including the profiles for UFW. So now if I UFW status or UFW app list, you can see that now I have the configurations for Apache as well. And if you're ever curious what these app profile rules actually do under the hood, you can just use UFW app info and then type in the name of the profile. So let's do the Nginx full. And you can see that it's going to enable ports 80 and ports 443 over TCP, so that's going to give you access to both HTTP and HTTPS connections on your web server. You can also create custom app profiles for UFW in Etsy UFW applications.d and then just name it whatever you want, which is really useful if you're going to be deploying something on a bunch of different servers and you don't want to repetitively configure the minimal privilege setting needed for that app, which is a bit more verbose, as you're going to see in a moment. But just as an example here, let's say that we want to call this our custom service, or we'll just call it custom. And the title is going to be, we'll call it custom service. The description of it is going to enable incoming traffic on a custom SSH port. So let's say this is a rule for if you're going to change your SSH port to something less common, just to reduce the amount of bot traffic in your logs. And let's even specify the port in here. Let's do 42069, and ports is going to equal 42069, and we only need to enable that over TCP, so then we can right quit. And then we need to update our app profile with UFW app update custom, so that's going to be the same name that you specified inside of the actual configuration file that you just created. And then we should be able to do UFW app list and see it listed there. And then we can even UFW allow custom and then UFW status verbose to see the rule that is allowed through that custom profile. So creating these custom UFW profiles and adding them to your deployment scripts are a really good way to automate your secure deployments. Now, the most common question about firewalls, besides what they are, is how you should actually configure one. And that is where the principle of least privilege comes in. So if you enable the default SSH profile like we have right here and right here, you can see that it's enabling any connections to port 22 over TCP from anywhere, from any IP address out there in the world. And another thing that UFW actually isn't showing us here right now is that these rules are being applied to all outgoing interfaces. Now, this machine only has one outgoing interface, right? I mean, it has the loopback, of course, but it only has, one interface that traffic can really be transferred or routed over. But if you had multiple interfaces, even if you had a virtual one for a VPN or something like that, and you don't need one of your services to be running over that interface, then it's better to manually set that to only be allowed over the interface or interfaces that you need it for in your firewall rules. And what's even more important is to set IP restrictions. So for example, let's say you have an internal tool that only needs to be used on your LAN. So this is something that, only employees in an office that are, connected to the Wi-Fi or whatever are going to be able to use. And let's say that service is running over port 8080, it would be better to do something like UFW allow from 192.168.10.24 to any port 8080. And so if I run my UFW status again, you can see that port 8080 isn't just reachable from anywhere, it's only going to be reachable from IP addresses that are inside of the LAN. Or going back to SSH in particular, since that gives you so much access, You might want to just have a dedicated VPN for your SSH connections. And that's actually a pretty common thing in organizations with remote employees. They won't be able to SSH or access particular resources unless they connect to a VPN first. And that security is then enforced by the firewall, only allowing connections to port 22 from that VPN's IP address or IP range. It's also worth checking the protocols that are allowed. So that's another thing that UFW doesn't show you with a lot of the standard connections, or sometimes it does if you're using a custom profile. All of these ports, not just the ones here, but from 1 to 65,535, can be used with TCP and UDP, but most applications are only going to use TCP because it's more reliable and makes sure that everything gets to you intact and in order, whereas UDP basically just yeets data across the interwebs. So I hope this serves as a good crash course on how to set up a firewall. Like most complex topics, you're much better off reading documentation to get a more thorough understanding instead of watching a YouTube video. And with UFW, the man page is a pretty good place to start. But if this video was useful to you, please like and share it to hack the algorithm, and check out my online store, based.win, where you can buy my awesome merch or accessories for your phone or laptop. 10% store-wide discount when you pay with Monero XMR at checkout. Have a great rest of your day.